That's better. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, gosh. Total computer malfunction before.
I think you're all set, Mark. I'll make
Okay,
you the
great.
host.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, good evening, everybody. I am going to call this meeting of the Hopkinton Budget Committee to order January 13th, 2021, 5:32 p.m. And let me start with the right to know meeting checklist, then we can go on to the rest of the agenda. As chair of the Hopkinton Budget Committee, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there's no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing public access to this meeting by telephone and also through the Zoom platform. All members of this committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting through Zoom, and the public has access to listen and participate in the meeting through the Zoom platform or by dialing in. The phone number to dial in is 1-646-558-8656. And the meeting ID is 892-1128-8232. We've also provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting on the town's website, www.hopkinton-nh.gov, on the Budget Committee website, and also on the town's Facebook page. If anybody has a problem, please call 746-8242, or you can email at townadmin@hopkinton-nh.gov. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we can adjourn the meeting and reschedule. All votes during this meeting will be taken by roll call, and we'll start with roll call attendance. When you state your presence, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So let me start with Don Houston.
Here alone.
Janet Krzyzaniak.
Here alone.
Norm Gupel.
Norm Gupel, and I am alone.
Ginny Haynes.
Ginny Haynes all by myself.
Jonathan Cohen.
I am here with all my friends, which is to say I am alone.
Thomas Lipoma.
Thomas Lipoma, and I'm here alone.
Great. Ken Traum.
Ken Traum, and I'm here alone.
Great. Steve Reddy.
Good evening, Steve Reddy, and here alone.
And Rich Houston.
Yes, Rich Houston is here with Edith Houston.
All right, thank you very much. And just a couple other quick notes. The budget community is unmuted, but everybody else who may be joining in is muted at this time. When we have the public comment periods, anybody who wishes to speak will be able to. You can use the chat function or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will have a couple of public comment periods. So with that, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ginny, would you be willing to lead us?
Absolutely. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seems so appropriate.
Yes.
Seems very appropriate for the time. Thanks, Ginny. Okay, we are going to move on to the approval of the December 9th, 2020 minutes. Let me see if I could start with a motion.
This is Ken. I'll move that we approve the minutes.
In a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so are there any clarifications, questions, or revisions for the minutes? No, all right. Tammy, nice work, as always. So I will, I think we can hopefully just do this by a show of hands because Tammy, is that okay? Because we can see everybody. So all in favor, please show your hands. Hold them up. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Tammy, are you good? Thank you. Great. And we're next going to turn to the school district. Norm's going to start with just some, I think, general updates and then move on at the appropriate time to the presentation of the school district budget.
Thanks,
All
Mark.
yours.
And thank you, Mark, and Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you hope 2021 is a better year for all of us. And I hope you guys had a great holiday and a great Christmas. Thank you for Steve and Michelle for joining me tonight to deliver our school board presentation. Just a couple things regarding the school district, just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. We have continued remote learning until February 1st. Steve will continue to update board with the status of what's going on in our district. Currently with the facility project, I've put in your packet our latest financials that we had yesterday for the meeting. Things are going great with the project. We continue to meet the needs of everything that's been promised at district meeting. Some exciting news. We received $62,000 back from the grant for fire suppression. So that will be added on to the project with other stuff. Part of that discussion yesterday in our meeting is that we are now looking at adults for the building project. Steve met with his leadership team and they discussed some wants and needs that they need for each location. Once they unpack that, we'll go to the board and discuss it and get that ball rolling. So if anyone has any questions regarding the building project, it's looking great. And if you have a chance, please drive by and take a look at Harold Martin. It's pretty exciting what's going on over there. All right. The next thing I wanted to share briefly is our financials from November. Not a whole lot has happened in there. Michelle has made a couple notes in there that we have reclassified expenses that were originally recorded to technology that we returned various of grants that have been received from the state. So she did a reclassification on that. She mentioned regarding food services, since we're in remote learning setting, we believe our meal counts will be reduced for next month. That will affect revenue. And another thing Michelle mentioned in our general fund is, and look at the revenue, we may have some changes in the near future that could reduce this amount due to remote learning and or sports. If there's any questions, she's here to answer them, or I can try and answer them regarding our November financials. We should be getting December in the next couple of weeks, but happy to answer any questions regarding our financials.
Great, thank you, Norm, and Michelle as well. So let's just open it if there's any questions from committee members on the financial update. Not seeing any questions. Carry on.
Great. And then the last thing that was in your packet that was important was our audit from last year. I really want to extend a thank you to Michelle Clark for such a great job for the work that she put into last year. The audit came back from the auditors with great reviews. And in this meeting tonight, we'll discuss a page from the audit on the audit from the unreserved fund balance, just to kind of give you guys an overview of how we used it last year. But I just wanted to extend a thank you to her for her hard work on our budget last year with answering all the questions that we needed. Thank you very much for that. And we're happy to answer any questions regarding that audit. You guys are just excited for the presentation, I can tell. So
I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
I will never want to ask a question about an audit. If it came through well, I say great. Good job.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you, everyone. All right. So I'm going to move to our the presentation for the Hopkinton Budget Committee. Steve's going to control my slides for me. And, you know, this is definitely a unique circumstance. I wish we were in person, but we're going to get through this. Before we begin, I have a just a brief statement that I wanted to read to the Budget Committee. Good evening. On behalf of the Hopkinton School Board, our Chair Jim O'Brien, Vice Chair Andrea Folsom, Rob Nato, Seth Aframe, and myself, I present you the Hopkinton School Board 2021-2022 approved school budget. I want to thank my fellow board members for their service over the last few months. We have done our best as a board to work together for what is best for our teachers, students, and taxpayers during a public health crisis. I want to thank them for their countless hours as we navigated through 90 hours of Zoom meetings. Together, we did our best to provide education to our students during a public health crisis. I would like to thank the Budget Committee for their service to this community, for their oversight and their commitment to this beautiful town. It's a privilege to work with you and all. Thank you to our town government, from the select board to our town administrator to our fire chief and police chief. We are grateful for all that you have done to keep Hopkinton safe and beautiful. Alfred North Whitehead once said, quote, "No one who achieves success does so without the help of others. The wise and confident acknowledge this help with gratitude," end quote. It's gratitude for our teachers and for our leadership team. Our teachers and leadership team have gone to incredible lengths to help our students to continue keep learning. To every teacher in our district and around the world, thank you for providing our kids with an education. To the parents at home who have made sacrifices for their children, I want to thank them for understanding, patience, and commitment to their child's education and well-being. To our students who have struggled with remote learning and missing their friends and teachers, you have been our focus in providing you with an education while remaining safe and healthy. Every choice we make has had an impact on you. We can only pray and hope in 2021 we will be better. We will have a better year for all of you. When I moved here in 2006, I moved here for the schools. My wife and I wanted to provide our 18-month-old son with the best education. Hopkinton had a reputation above all care. The person overseeing the district was our superintendent of schools, Steve Chamberlain. Tonight, I present you with his final budget with the Hopkinton School District. We owe you our gratitude to you, Steve, for your years of service and hard work. Thank you for your love and care for the district. Thank you for providing our students in this community with your leadership, work ethic, and knowledge. All the hard work you put into this district will never be forgotten. It's been an honor to work with you. You've made me a better board member and a better father. Understand, under your watch, many students continue to grow and become leaders in our community. Thank you, Steve, for everything you have done for this district and for this community. I wish we were in a town hall right now and Steve was able to see all of us here, but I would like to ask the Budget Committee to please unmute your mic and please join me in a round of applause for our Superintendent of Schools, Steve Chamberlain. Steve, we already messed up. The slide was supposed to be gratitude, and now it's, I already read my statement, so we're already off sync already.
Well, those are tremendously nice words. You didn't tell me you were going to do that, or I would have muted you or something. No.
Thank you, Steve. All right, I am ready to begin our presentation for the school board. So today we're going to discuss, first of three meetings, more if needed. A plan for today is to discuss the budget process, the budget drivers, walk through the warrant, cost per student, And at the end of this presentation, we're going to go through the binder that was provided to you and go through some documentation. Next slide. The plan for January 20th is to answer questions, provide requested documentation to unpack the HEA tentative agreement. Jim and Andrea will present this agreement next week at our next meeting, and we'll also walk through the budget bulletin. The plan for January 27th is to answer more questions, provide you with requested documentation, and we should have some more language that we might need from our attorney regarding a warrant on that day before our vote that's upcoming. So the budget process is a very long process. You know, this board had met 5 times to discuss the budget, but outside that specific window, the finance committee met 3 different times. Working with Rob, Steve, and Michelle, we were able to deliver a budget to the Hopkinton School Board on January 7th, in which we were able to have them vote a 5-0 vote on the budget that we set forth as a recommendation to them. In this slide, you can see the days that Steve delivered certain presentations, and at the end of this process on January 7th, the board agreed to this budgeting process. Moving forward, we can see, as discussed on January 13th, 20th, and 27th, you know, we're going to become best friends and discuss more about this budget moving forward. So the FY22 budget drivers, you know, when we talk about drivers, we talk about, you know, impacts in our budget. 2 of the big main drivers in our budget this year is the facility project, bond, and retirement. As you know, a couple years ago, this town agreed to a facility project, and it's been an honor to oversee that with the other 4 board members, Steve Chamberlain and Michelle. The board supported dividing the project into 2 bonds. So this year, we are the second portion. The second bond, first portion, is due, which is an increase of $287,000 for a total amount of $414,000. As you know, with this facility project, you know, a lot has been unpacked in this, with fire suppression, a 4th classroom, and we just continue to produce the taxpayers' quality in a project to improve our schools for the quality of education and to really not look back on this deferred maintenance. Our second budget driver is retirement. 2 classification of our employees are in the retirement system: employees and teachers. Superintendents are employees, and teachers are a different classification. So for teachers, we have to pay 21.02% of the retirement, and then for superintendent or employees would be a 14.06%. Therefore, the increase in this budget is $247,000, a total of $1.7 million that goes towards this specific item of retirement. This next slide is the warrant, the order that we plan on doing. We will walk through this more in depth, but just to give the budget committee an overview: reports to agent, budget, the teacher's contract, increase to tax rate stabilization, utilize the interest from the bond, the fund, the technology trust fund, building repair, and any other forms of business. But this is what the plan is for March 20th warrant. The total amount that's been approved from the Hopkinton School Board is $21,732,059. This is an increase of 3.8%. This includes the bond, but does not include the warrant of the teacher's contract. So strictly budget increase and the bond is a 3.8% increase, which is $795,767. So let's unpack the operating budget increase. You know, let's discuss wants and needs. We are required, as discussed in the past couple slides, the New Hampshire retirement, 246,000. We have the bond that was agreed upon from this town a couple years ago at 287. The board felt $25,000 for PPE for our students for next year was appropriate. Steve and his team have come to us and saying they need another IA, which is 37,000. And there is a required increase of out-of-district tuition, which is 114,000. Necessary increases was transportation, which is $86,000. Due to enrollment for third grade, we will need an additional third grade teacher at 89,000. And the district really, looking at the stats and looking at the information in the district, really needed a numerous assistant. And Steve brought that to the board saying he's looked at the data, he's looked at what's required, and said that was something we needed. Operating budget increase is $927,045. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is we had to overcome lower state funding. It was $860,182. To do that, we had to do the following things in this slide. I will talk to a couple of them, and then I'll ask Steve and Michelle to address a little bit more regarding food services and special ed. But on the final two, the board has taken $150,000 from the fund balance and applying it as revenue with an anticipation of $542,000 that will be left at the end of the year. We will be taking $250,000 from tax rate stabilization fund and having $150,000 remaining. As you know, last year we did not use anything from the tax stabilization fund. That's correct, Steve, right? Yeah, last year we didn't use any. And the other thing I want to speak to is student activities. Rob, myself had a finance committee meeting where we discussed raising, students to play. It's currently, it will be $100 at 200 max per family moving forward, which nets us $20,000 of additional revenue for the district. The other thing I want to mention is adequacy over there for 97.5. That's the lowest amount that the board felt comfortable putting in there. We did not go higher because we do not know what's going to happen next year in regards to enrollment. We don't know what's going to happen coming out of a global pandemic. I will turn over to Steve or Michelle to discuss a little bit of the food services and special ed aid, please.
Sure. Just to remind you where we were, this is really the slide that addresses the $640,000 one-time revenue from the state last year that came up quite a lot in last year's process. What did we do with that and how do we adjust? So the 640 and plus we've had a declining enrollment due to increased homeschool, as Mr. Gupel said, regarding the pandemic. So the state adequacy hole was larger than the 640. It's about the 800 and so that Mr. Gupel quoted. So the board looked for strategies on how to overcome such a large deficit due to the 640 one time and the change in enrollment. So at the end of last year, we were notified from Health Trust that we were going to have a rebate on our premium. And we were very cognizant of the revenue hole in that we were able to, with the auditors and the board support, to put that in a savings account and ready to add revenue because we knew our food service was going to be light because of the pandemic. So we had a late addition from Health Trust and we put it in a savings account to use as revenue this year to offset some of the loss in food service. So that 150 is there to use this year, which helps us defray the large deficit revenue hole from the state. Norm talked about the student activities going from 60 to 100 and then 100 to 200 from a season to a family cap, increasing the cost share of the extracurricular program. We were just recently notified, and as many of you are used to, we start in October and we go all the way through to March and we get additional information. So recently we were provided with information regarding our special education aid. For those who've been doing this for a while, it used to be called catastrophic aid. That is a state aid for high value students. And so our increase, our special education aid, we were able to add $40,000 more revenue there. Norm talked about the adequacy. So you can budget, some years we budgeted low at the 95%, and some years we budgeted the full 100%, depending on our trends of enrollment. And the board settled in right in the middle, feeling that was not too conservative and not too aggressive. It was right in the sweet spot based where we are. We think our enrollment's going to grow next year when we get back in full, but we were hesitant to commit to the entire adequacy because we may not reach that point. This year, there's $125,000 that we're funding our trust when we go through those through revenue from fund balance. So this is where we log the revenue there. And then if you remember, last year at this time, the presentation was we were trying to reset the fund balance to $150,000. Then at our second or third shot at the budget later spring and early summer, we went to 392. And this year, because of the huge budget, the state hole, we've gone to 542. That's about as high as Michelle and I and the board are comfortable with, but we know we have to squeeze because of that large hole. And last year, I appreciated the board's decision. They fully funded Article 10, the tax rate, with about $394,000. And we're going to take 250. That leaves 150 in. But this is the year, and that's what the purpose for, when you have large holes, to try to stabilize your tax rate, taking money from there. So that's the comprehensive strategy that Michelle and I and the Finance Committee and the boards looked at pretty exhaustively over the last month, trying to do a balance of aggressive and conservative, but trying to do the best we can to overcome the largest structural state adequacy deficit in my time as your superintendent. Norm, does that help?
That does. Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it. So just want to go through a little bit of the articles. Next week, as discussed, Jim and Andrea will speak to this next week, a one-year contract at $241,000. We will provide questions for you guys next week on that. The next one is basically language change in the tax rate stabilization fund. Currently, legislation has allowed this to increase to 5% as opposed to 2.5%. Before the budget committee's final vote, we will have the right wording on this. We're checking with our attorney on a couple things right now. As you know, with the unreserved fund balance, we're allowed to do 2.5%. But in order for us to increase this, we have to go through a warrant and have it approved at the school district meeting. This is very similar, similar to the ability of the town of Hopkinton. I'm sure, Steve, other school districts are doing exactly the same thing, I am sure.
Some do.
Yeah.
To be honest, under Michelle's leadership, we were the first district to adopt the original tax rate stabilization, the 2.5. And we are trying to increase it to have the same flexibility that the town of Hopkinton has.
Perfect. All right, the next thing is interest on our bond. As discussed here in a previous meeting, I mentioned that we do have interest from the bond. And in order for us to use that towards the facility project, we need authorization from the town to do that. 10,000, for example, would go towards flooring, which is always a great thing for our school district, but we need to have approval from the town in order to do that. That's a great photo, Steve.
Great idea, Mr. Cooper.
Yes. Next thing is our technology trust. This will allow for the purchase and replacement of equipment over time, especially important as the district did one back when they purchased Chromebooks this year. This is coming out of the fund balance as we have received grants to support this purchase. So this is something that we are really excited about using moving forward. And in the future, if the district decides to withdraw from this, it would just be like our repair and maintenance, where we'd hold a public hearing and notify the public of withdrawals from this technology trust. The next one is our school district repair and maintenance fund. This year, we have planned expense of 205, and we plan to not have less than 132 at the end of this year. by contributing 150 into FY22, we have planned expenses of 281,000, including AC coolant. If this goes through the 281,000, we'll only have a remaining balance of $1,400. At the conclusion of the warrant, the total assessment is $1,282,780.55. The tax bill estimate increase is $1.65 per 1,000.
That's for all the warrants, Norm?
Yes, that is correct. And then just a little bit of an overview of where Hopkinton stands among our neighbors. We are ranked 24th, right middle of the pack per pupil, while maintaining a high performance of education to our students. Being ranked in the top 3 in the state of New Hampshire, it's great that Hopkinton is the middle of the pack. 24 out of 52. Still middle is a good thing for the cost per pupil. It's our average cost. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions. I have Steve and Michelle to answer any questions from this presentation regarding our budget proposal.
Great. Thank you, Norm. Because I can't see everybody while you're sharing your screen, if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing your screen, and then if people want you to refer to a slide, you can pop it back up. First thing I wanted to ask is just, can you make this presentation available to committee members and to the public, actually, if we can put that on the town website tomorrow, do you think?
Yes, I can put it in the same folder that we provided all the materials earlier. We can do that. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. All right, so folks, let me just say you can, for committee members, you can raise your hand like this, or raise your hand in the participants section down below. You just click on participants and then click on raise hand. And I will try to monitor both of those. Ken.
Well, thanks, Norm and Steve and Michelle. And this is a question, I don't know if it's been determined yet. I understand that the state is getting about 165 million more in stimulus money for education. Do you know how much is going to Hopkinton, and is that built into the budget?
So no, we haven't had a lot of direction, Ken. Thanks for the question yet. We have heard that it's could be PPE and supplies. Originally, Michelle and I had $100,000 of PPE in the budget, and we reduced that because we think we're going to get more state aid in that category, down to 25. But we're not sure what the formula. We've had one piece was Title I. One form of revenue we received was based on our Title I numbers, which comparatively to other districts are low. Others, it was a different formula. So we're waiting to see what that will do. But we did reduce our PPE based on the assumption that we're going to get more aid.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great. Jonathan, you're up next.
Thanks, and thank you for all the hard work, Steve, Norm, and Michelle, and everybody else. I really ought to know this better by now, but can you just talk a little bit more on the fund balance and what that is, and how you're sort of using that just for the just to explain that a little bit more.
Sure. So one of the things that's unique, we're a single district, and the fund balance is connected to a single town. So for a long time, Michelle has been asked to report out every month on where we are on fund balance, and the fund, anything left over is used as revenue to reduce the tax rate at the end of the year. And we have a document that we can go through, or we can go through now. I can show it to you now, Jonathan, or we can just do it when we go through the supplemental materials. but the district is required to budget certain things by CBA, collective bargaining agreements. And sometimes, especially in the last year, we're required, for example, to have $400 for professional development and a third of the staff member to have UNH courses. And based on the pandemic, there's been a lot less professional development that has been used. So that would go back into the fund balance category. If, this year we didn't fund under Michelle's incredible monitoring of expenses in where we are, we didn't fund a couple of food service positions because of where we are. That could go into fund balance. If we had unanticipated changes in plans, that could go into fund balance. So and this has been a point, so the fund balance gets placed on, reduces the tax rate at the tax setting, so you don't raise that money again. And it shows that the board, and we're going to go through and show you what the board did at the end of the year to meet the 392 very transparently, very publicly. So we don't have a buying spree at the end of the year. Oh, let's spend $542,000 on things. We want to be very cognizant of the tax rate. So it is unanticipated. It is contractual obligations that aren't spent. And when we do spend some of the fund balance, it's done in public at meetings, and the board takes a specific vote. And there is a document from the budget bulletin we're going to preview tonight showing the history of the fund balance, as well as what the board did and how the fund balance was developed this year.
Thank you.
So in essence, it's an operating surplus. Right, that is then carried forward as revenue in the following year's budget, or some portion of which is carried forward as revenue in the following year's budget.
Very well said. I think that was even better than I said. Succinct to the point. So good work.
Great. I have a couple of questions because I'm not seeing anybody else raising their hand right now. Norm, I think I understood that you said that 100% of the first bond has been, 100% of the first bond, there'll be a payment. There's a payment reflected in this coming year's budget that for 100% of the first bond principal and interest and a portion of the second bond. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and then what percent of that second bond? So like how much more will it be next year versus this year in terms of the bond expenditure in the budget?
So this is the biggest bump because it completes the first one and it's the first half of the second one. And the next year it'll be just the second part of the second one. And Michelle can speak to it exactly because it's not a full year payment because we won't have the bond interest and the principal for that full year. Michelle, any idea what percentage that's going to be? I know you and I talked about looking forward what the whole payment could be in a year.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the debt schedule estimated for the following one. So for the 22-23 year, now mind you, again, we haven't gone out for the bond. We're not going out until July. So we won't know, but there was a sale recently from the bond bank that did very well. So we expect it to be about this, but it could change. So I just want to preface that. So what we had to budget in 21-22 was just under $120,000 for the interest for next year for that bond. The following year, it's just under $347,000.
So
it'll be
thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
So, and do you have the rate that was used for that estimate right there on the sheet?
2.25.
And as Michelle said, we got notice of the recent bond run. So the first rate on the bond was 1.76, the most on a 20-year note. The most recent run was 1.58. And the estimate that Michelle just provided is a 2.25. So we hope to beat, and we expect, I guess, Michelle, you and I we can say expect to beat the 2.25, because that would be a big increase from the 1.58 in 6 months ish. And that will complete the the staggered approach to the bond, which reduced the impact on the taxes over a 3-year period. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Steve, hang on one second. I'm gonna ask one more question if that's okay, and then I'm gonna call on you. And then can you speak a little bit further to the retirement costs? So I think I understood the total retirement budget for 21-22 is 1.7 million. It's a $247,000 increase, which is like 15% increase. That is, and just about the why of that increase, is that all based on a state mandate?
Sure.
Yeah, so just what's driving the 15% increase?
Sure, and just a little bit of history. My first year as superintendent, the state paid 35% of retirement, which would have been $600,000 this year if that continued. And then it went to 30%. And then in 2013, it went all the way down to 0. And so every 2 years, the law requires an actuarial change based on the earned interest of the account. So this is an actuarial change year. Last year, for example, it was 11% and 17%. And this year went up to what the slide was, I think 14 and 21. So what feeds into this is not only, and Michelle's really knowledgeable in this area, I've learned a lot from her, it's not just the market, it's also that there are 1,000 less teachers than there were recently. So there's less people paying in, and there's less interest. So that means by law, the employer share has to be adjusted every 2 years. And there has been an employee share. When I started, for example, as a teacher, it was a 5% share. Now it's a 7% employee share. And the reason why the employer share is so expensive, for years it was the employer was under contributed. And for many years, the employer contributed less than the employee. And under Judd Gregg, when he was governor, it was like 1.6% was the employer share. Passed the buck down, and then a few years ago, a commission, and it's supported by law, wanted to make sure that the retirement system was solvent and readjusted the employee share, readjusted what is pensionable, how much of one's salary is pensionable, and retirement age, and how many years that the retirement, how many years of salary determines your rate. So that is required by statute. That we have to do that, and it's an actuarial change.
Okay, that's great. That's really informative, Steve. Thank you very much. Steve, ready? And then Jonathan, you're up after Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Norm, you and the school board, a huge thanks for all the work. I know you put a lot of hours into this, redoing the whole budget format, and just thank you. And Steve Chamberlain, obviously, I think the excellence of the school district starts at the top and works its way down. So a personal thank you from somebody that has kids in the school. So earlier when I broached these numbers with my partner, who's a taxpayer, an average taxpayer, and has kids in school here in Hopkinton, and her initial reaction was, what happened to all the money that we're saving by not having our kids in school? The buses aren't running. The utilities should be a lot less. The food service program is running at a reduced capacity. And I'm sure there's some others, but those are the ones I think for most people that come to mind. I'm wondering, in presenting this budget to the community, whether a slide or a presentation discussing the savings as well, and kind of how that money tied into the budget, so that, because you don't want the public perception to be just, that money is not there somewhere and not being accounted for. So that, not really a question, but just kind of my 2 cents on how the budget is being presented.
Thank you, Steve. We absolutely look at that, and really that's the increased estimate in the fund balance. The 542 would represent savings that we anticipate. That what's coming out of, for the trust is also fund balance, and things like. But yes, we can take a look at that and appreciate that very much, and thank you for your kind words.
That's a great suggestion, Steve. Yeah, I think that would be I think that would be very informative for people to see that broken down with at least estimates. Jonathan.
Yeah, just one other thing. Just about the recommendation to add the numeracy assistant. I recall a lot of discussion about the elimination of this position last budget. And I wondered if you might speak just a little bit to what has brought you to the conclusion that that is really something that we need, and how, you know, that's affected students this year not having that.
Sure, and this is related to the pandemic. We know that math, which is sequential and spirals, and we have what we call an RTI process, response to intervention, in place, where we have curriculum-based measures to determine where kids are. Are they on grade level? Are they behind? Are they ahead? And we have allocated time to support youngsters. And this year, we have determined, based on our assessment, that math is one of the areas that we're struggling with in keeping kids and supporting kids with difficulties. And what a numeracy assistant does, it will give us a full-time person in each school to support kids in mathematics. In one of the things we did my third or fourth year in was to revamp our entire elementary math system. We hired a math specialist, we changed the program, we did RTI, and we added an assistant. We really followed our literacy model, where we had interventionists and people to work. And really in elementary, Jonathan, in elementary school, it's literacy, numeracy, and social emotional skills. Those are our focus of the 3 areas. And we have demonstrated gaps to our assessments, and we know a full-time person under the door. We have a new numeracy specialist, Jess Pickering, and adding an assistant will be able to leverage her expertise and really double the intervention time and support kids, made more necessary due to the pandemic, and certainly more essential due to the lack of that position this year. It is not a requirement, but it is something that we think is necessary. We know that next year, when we go back full, we're gonna need to catch up people in mathematics, ensure reading, our literacy supports are there, and social emotional help as well. So we have data that supports increased math intervention to reintegrate our students when we're back full time next year.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the committee? I will ask one. Can you refresh us on the budgeting for 97.5% of adequacy? I know we talk about this every year, and I think there's 2 questions that often get asked. One is, what is our track record? You know, let's just say the past 3 to 5 years of what percentage of budget adequacy we've actually received. And then the second is, how much money are we talking for each additional 1%? Let's say we're good to go up from 97.5 to 98.5. What is the additional revenue we would budget for every additional 1%?
Sure, I'm sure Michelle can hit that for you. It's a great question. So we've, over our time together, Michelle and I's time together, we've gone through a trending down in enrollment. We got down to 860 as a district, and we've been trending up as enrollment. We got to almost 1,100 as a district. And so when we were looking at the enrollment projections, we try to take a look. So the way it works, there's adequacy aid, and then there's equalized, there's differentiated aid. So adequacy aid is based on just head count. So you get 3,500 or so per head count. More head counts, then you have more adequacy. Differentiated aid is based on classification. So we get more aid for a special ed student, more aid for a free reduced lunch student, more aid for an English language learner, and more aid for someone who is not on grade level in reading in 3rd, 4th grade. That's differentiated aid. So all those variables go into the prediction. Now, the state gives us a number that is the floor. And it's one thing that's changed since my time as superintendent we report now regular. Used to be on this day, that's the number, and so you could have a number and 2 years later still not have an accurate count. But now we report average daily membership regularly throughout the year to keep that number updated. And so we're trying to project, are we on the trending up? And so then we feel pretty confident that we're going to get the full adequacy. Are we trending down? You don't want to overestimate your enrollment, your revenue, and then at tax rate setting not follow through on our estimate. So they give us a floor, and that is, they do give us a minimum. And then they also, the board can decide to take 100%. On the years we were trending up and feeling really good about where we were and the projections were, we would take 100%. But Michelle and I actually talked projections today, or emailed back and forth. We didn't go through them, but the projection now is significantly different because of the homeschool and because of the pandemic. So we're not comfortable going the full 100% because we just don't know. But we're also not comfortable with the 95 because we don't think we're going to get the exodus again. And some of these families have indicated they're going to return. And so we have, I think once Michelle and I, right, we estimated too high and the adequacy didn't come in. And so then we hope we have either Medicaid higher, special education higher, or fund balance higher to meet our estimate. Michelle, did you come up with a 1% increase? How much that would be?
Yeah, before I give it though, I must say that what Steve just talked about happened this year. So thank God we're getting more in state aid for special education, because it's going to help us with the shortage that we didn't anticipate because we did 100% for adequacy. So it's twice now that we had that happen, obviously a lot related to the pandemic. It's only $24,810 is a 1% change.
So our representative Luno has issued an LSR, a legislative service request, trying to set adequacy at last year's amount, because we're not the only district. The 640 that we've had to come up with, other districts having to come up with millions of dollars of loss in revenue. So, for example, if when the new legislature hits, and if that is seen, that would be a game changer. Right, we'd have an influx of revenue based on last year's adequacy, understanding that this is a very, very strange year, and that and one of the things that some districts are worried about is free reduced counts for the differentiated aid, because we don't have a strong number, because some people said, I get it even if I don't have to register. And so people are, and that's every free reduced lunch student, we get differentiated aid additional funds. So I think the 97.5 is a good start, and we're hoping that the legislature does some increased revenue for us and for all districts, as our representative will be submitting that bill.
Thanks very much. And just maybe one quick follow-up, and then Don, I see you waving. So Michelle, you mentioned that we are going to come in under our, we budgeted 100% this year, and we're not going to receive that. Do you have a sense of what percent we're going to receive? I'm just curious, like, this seems like almost like a worst case year, right? We have a pandemic, and we have a whole bunch of families that decide to homeschool. And so I'm curious in this
I think we're going to be closer to the 95, which is the least they can give us. That's the worst case scenario that we can do. But again, it's a rolling. It also relates to free and reduced. So there's a lot of things that factor in. So things can change today that affect it because we get our payments in quarters.
Okay.
So if that kind of helps to make any sense.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Don.
The actual payment, Steve, as I understand it, Michelle, is based on head count. Is there a lag between the head count and the determination of how much you're paid? Is it a year lag, 2 year lag? Or I remember that was sort of when I was looking at that much more finely last year or the year before.
Yeah, I think as Michelle said, we get paid quarterly and we report. So I can look into it, Don, but I don't know how. There used to be, you're right, used to be a 1 to 2 year going back to those numbers, but it's much more up to date now.
That's
but
good.
I can exactly how long it is, but that changed. We direct report our ADM regularly now to the state.
Good. I thought it was 2 years before. Maybe it was. Good. Thank you.
I think you're right. Years ago. which is great if you were stuck at a very high number. You like that if it's a high.
Yes.
Ken,
Just so I can understand the overall numbers again, I believe, Steve or Norm, it indicated that if all of the warrant articles, as you provided them today, were approved, that would be a $1.65 increase?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
And is that the 3.8%, or is that no more like 5%?
Right, the 3.8% is just the expense side. The total tax rate takes into account the change in revenue.
So what we're gonna do later in this presentation, Ken, is we're gonna unpack that in a snapshot. So you're gonna be able to see the increase with the bond, teacher's contract, and just budget on the tax rate. We developed this, a presentation that Rob will speak to at this presentation to kind of give you guys an overview of what came from the finance committee that the board agreed to the budgeted amount.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait.
Yep. Yeah.
So we can walk through those support documents if you'd like.
that sounds good. Let's do that.
So I'm going to share the screen. Let's see. Well, so this should be, if all goes well, this is the first page in your document, and this is the budget worksheet. I want to make sure. So before I start, I just, Mr. Goupel, I really appreciate your comments. And as you saw, that this year's theme was gratitude. And it really came from my, as you know, I came here 22 years ago. My son was 6 months old. He's now over 22. My daughter was born my first year as principal. And Lucille Gaskell was the first budget committee chair, and then it went to Patty Gersony and Karen Irwin, and of course, Janet, thank you for all your years of service. And now, of course, to Mark. So you were, the budget committees in Hopkinton have been very gracious to a very inexperienced superintendent 12 years ago. For that, I will always be in your debt and very grateful to all you've done for me and my family. And so we're going to go through the 9 or 10 sheets and answer any questions as we go. But this is what we've tried to do under Rob's and Norm's direction is start high level and drill down as we go through this. So this is your 3 years, and I can make it a little bit bigger. Is that better? Can you see those a little bit? Okay, so you get some 3 years now. If you want to know what 1920 and 1819 and 2021, and then you have the different areas, we're going to write, we have the 1100s, 1200s instructional program, and we go all the way through facilities. And this is just a big one-page, big expansive view of the budget. You can look at areas of percent of the budget and then what the increases, the percentage are. Now, and we're also going to break this down by building and by program for you in the next few minutes. And then overall, the green line, Ken, this is the 3.8% we just talked about, and this is the expense side of the budget rather than last year.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody okay?
Steve, I have a quick question as I'm trying to
Sure.
follow along. If you could scroll up to the top, the column headings, where you have dollar difference and percent difference, that is 2021 to 21-22. Is that right?
You got it.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody okay? And we'll definitely, if you have questions as you dig in for next week, we're happy to come back, and we'll be back. So this is one of my favorite sheets. This is page 2. And this is now the revenue side. Can you guys see that okay? So this is the food service transfers we talked about that we were able to put aside based on the health trust revenue. This is your student activities that Norm talked about. This is the athletic fee. This is the 100,000 we're not going to get from health trust. This is the special ed aid that we talked about. Here's the big one. This is the state adequacy, the 640 plus declining enrollment issues. This is increased revenue from the statewide property tax, which is raised here, stays here. And this is the revenue from the maintenance trust to pay for the performance contract. The board will have to adopt, and Norm alluded to this, we've got advice from DRA on how to handle this differently than last year. So that's how we got to 3.8%. This is the transfer we talked about. This is the fund balance is up. See, it was 392 last year. It's 542. We added 150. That's Steve. That's from some of the savings we've talked about through the pandemic, but we'll unpack that for you. And here's the 250 from tax rate stabilization. We did not take any last year, and we didn't want to take it because of the 640. So our deficit hole is 212. This is our local tax rate, $1.57, and our state tax rate, and this gets us to $1.65. This is the expense side is here. The revenue side is here. Together, we get to the $1.65 that was on the last, almost the last slide in the presentation.
And to be clear, this is included in the teacher's contract. If it went through,
Everything.
it'd be 165 for all the warrants. Yep.
This is the entire warrant cost.
Can you take a question?
Sure.
Looking at this sheet here, the 42,500, that shows on the major increases and major decreases as a deficit, but here it shows obviously as a positive. Is one of those is the one on the separate sheet? Should that be shown that way as a negative?
This shows the same thing. It's a deficit. A negative revenue is a deficit.
Right, but aren't we showing it here as a revenue positive?
No, it's zero. It's the zero right before the 42.5 and the negative amount.
I'm confused now, Michelle. I don't know what zero.
Steve, can you point it out?
That zero right there.
Yep.
All right, on a sheet I've got,
different.
it doesn't show it that way. It shows it as the 42.5 where the zero is and the zero where the 42.5 is.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask that too. I think the sheet that we have is dated 1/11/21 at the bottom left-hand corner. And I don't think that's the same. I think it's been updated.
Can you drop down to the date? Can you drop down to the date and see if that is? No, it shows 1/11 still.
Yeah, because ours was the same up until you get down to that other financing sources, and those columns are not the same.
That was a late change from DRA, so I apologize. We had a little bit of office reduction people, so we'll make sure we clean this and get you the right one. But this is, Michelle, this is the accurate one, correct?
Yes, this is the accurate one, which is the one I have. So I think it's from the old one from the board meeting, which had to change because DRA, we found out after the board meeting.
So I apologize. We'll make sure for next week, we'll update this one in your folder.
Okay, because it also affects the total amount of money on the total warrant articles to be raised on the first sheet, the budget sheet, does not match what the MS 222 number is on the revenue sheet. And that's the difference, the 42.5.
Yes, that was done. That was a late change by DRA and how to handle the expense from the maintenance trust to support the performance contract. The last 3 years, we had it one way, and it was a last minute change. The board will be updating the numbers next Thursday.
Good.
And we'll make sure this sheet gets updated. And then, again, that's my fault.
But Steve, you're saying that it was a plus and a minus, so it nets out to 0, and that's why it stays $1.65 on both
Exactly.
sheets.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it was harder to tell the difference between the sheets, so that's my fault. You got it, Ken. Thanks, Don. I appreciate that very much. Everybody okay? But the $1.65, this is absolutely the tax rate. So here is, and this is, we had a slide to talk about it, but this unpacks this a little bit more. These are the major increases in the operational budget. And so last year, if you added what was approved last year and the Teamster article, that's where we started. This is the bond, the retirement. We've had to increase or transfer to contract services, out of district tuition, transportation, vocational tuition, and you'll see this next week when we go through the budget bulletin, but this is our Concord Regional Technical Center issue, health insurance, transportation, supplies because of the PPE, fuel, insurance, some books. So the major increases there is $1,041,000. Salaries went down, FICA, telephone and equipment. And that's where, those are the major increases by category in FY22.
Can I just ask one thing on this?
Please.
The increase of 7.25% on electricity, fuel, propane, and gasoline, like, it just seems counterintuitive that would be going up at all.
Well, one thing to remember is that we added on to Harold Martin.
Mhm.
We also had, we have an energy buying group that gives us our pricing. And so the pricing for electricity, and we come out of a 3-year contract. So we do this all based, and sometimes as we get closer, like recently, as early as 2 days ago, I think, or a day ago, it's all blending, but we just locked into the fuel super duper early. So we haven't even had a chance to tell the board about it yet. So, but again, one thing to remember is we're adding a bunch of area at Harold Martin. So we do have to obviously have the selected fuel sources.
No longer counterintuitive.
Everybody okay? And here's the revenue, the complementary revenue increases, decreases, fund balance, sorry, Article 10, fund balance, the food service we spoke about, the property tax, special ed and student activities. And then this is the big one. We went down in adequacy. We won't get that. We don't anticipate the refund. And the maintenance trust is a loss of revenue. We had to account for that a different way. Everybody okay?
Steve, just to, you stated this earlier, but the reduction in adequacy, there was the one-time, quote, one-time $640,000 state aid. And then the additional 220 is basically anticipated reduction in enrollment and the other, some combination, right, of
Differentiated aid.
differentiated aid, yeah.
And head count. And remember, it would have been compared to where our last adequacy was.
Okay.
Everybody okay? So this is,
Steve, sorry, could I ask one more question on the fund balance issue? And maybe you or Norm said this earlier. Is part of the anticipated fund balance this year, how does the most recent COVID relief package, if at all, influence additional revenue that might contribute to the fund balance this year?
great question. So last year, and we'll go through this last year, the board voted to expend some funds in June to buy like Chromebooks. And they set aside $40,000 for student services and related to COVID the pandemic. And because we have received additional aid, we haven't had to expend all of those funds set aside. So whatever's not expended in those funds will add to the fund balance. And so there's usually, Michelle, if we were together, and typically I would have said the word supplant, and then Michelle would have said, Steve, we can't do that. But for some of the COVID grants, the governor about supplanting was eliminated. And so that's why she doesn't have to kick me virtually. But so we haven't had to utilize. And so we had, I think, 100. So we had 3 rounds of aid: ESSA, CARES Act aid, and then supplemental aid. And then there was another tranche of funds. And we have fully budgeted the first one, Michelle, 191. Does that sound?
So the first one was the ESSA, which was about just about $42,000. That's the only funds that you could actually do, like what Steve is talking about, supplanting. The other funds, you could not do that. And you could not use it as a revenue gapping item, like the towns I've heard have been able to do in the state. The school districts were not given that option.
And then the other, we had the other tranche, we bought equipment and PPE, and then we were also able to do, and I'm sure Norm's reported, we were able to do some HVAC work at Harold Martin School through those funds. So all that together helps us, and that's why we were comfortable taking the $25,000 for tech out of fund balance, because we received funds. Mark, does that help? Thank you. Everybody okay? It's very hard for me to read the poker faces on Zoom. I was a little bit
good.
So this started the journey a few years ago, and Janet will remember this. This is the programmatic budget that we use. So to provide information on how much we spend in art, for example, at Harold Martin, Maple Street, Millen High School, Hopkinton High School, and things like that. So this, again, now unpacks it deeper. So you can see administration costs, other expenses, the academics in general. And I can certainly increase the size. It's just sometimes you lose the categories. But this is to the response. For example, we spend in world language at Harold Martin School, no surprise, 0 at Harold Martin, 0 at Maple. The middle school, we 142, high school 296. That is our cost for our world language program.
Steve, I have a question on this. I think when we had been talking with the district about the programmatic budget, and I'm thrilled to see this, so thank you very much. There was also interest in seeing change over time in these program areas. And I'm just wondering, now that we've got at least maybe 1 or 2 years under our belt, if it's possible to do that, not necessarily by school, but even by total.
Good question. We've tried to work with our vendor on actually using a programmatic budget in the implementation phase, and it's been a very much of a struggle. Sometimes we have to start fresh in the next year's programmatic budget, and I'm not so sure, Michelle, if we can go year to year on the programmatic budget yet.
We cannot do actual expenditures because they come from different tables, and I've been after them for a year to be able to do that, and they've been working on it. So
okay, thanks.
this is at this point they have not come to a point that I could run a button and it could be an actual live. It's just cool. At the budget time.
Okay, thanks.
And I can tell you, there's never been more of a bulldog on this issue in my entire life than Michelle Clark pursuing our vendor to get it on the implementation side. And
you'll get there, Michelle. You'll get there.
Well, Steve knows because he's CC'd on every single email, and I'm not kidding. He's not kidding.
It's one of the things we try to instill in our students is resilience and perseverance. It's right there in front and center, just so you know. Everybody okay? Questions about this level of programmatic budget? We have more levels coming.
I've got 2 or 3 random questions.
Sure, love them.
On the first one, under other expenses, the one that jumps out is 141 under various. Excuse me, excuse me, 49,000 under various, under Harold Martin. What does that one do? Because it's not in any of the other columns, basically.
Michelle, any thoughts about what? is
I
under that?
honestly, this is one that, it's not one that it's really one that we created many years ago. I'd have to actually look at the Bible that we gave everybody that says this is what's captured here, because honestly,
We'll get
I
that
push
for
a
you next-
button. I don't even have time to verify this. So hopefully they haven't done things when they're trying to do the other one to monkey this up wrong.
That's quite all right. The next
But
question
I
would be
can look into it.
Thank you. The next one would be operating transfers in that same basic category, 175,000. What does that one mean?
Well, that's the 150 to the maintenance trust and 25,000 to the,
Okay,
Trust
that's
fund.
simple. That's simple.
so I do know that one.
That's good. Yeah, hard to get one by you. The next one is, if you go down the academic side,
Yep.
the core academics line is the big hitter, 2,000,006. What is the difference between what's in that and in the next four, which I assume, in my mind, is our core courses?
Yeah, it's grade level. I think K through 5, the teachers all teach the same subject. So the teachers all teach the 4 subjects. And in the 6 through 12, we differentiate by teacher.
Okay,
So-
it's about the same amount for those two. The 6 through 12 is 2.8 million, the other one's 2.6. So we're spending about the equal amount of dollars on the first 5 or 6 years as we are on the next 6 years.
Yeah, and that's because staffing is mostly what we pay. And 6 years, you're pretty close to dividing the district in half.
Yeah, good. It's always amazing to see that the academic side is 43% of the total cost on this whole page, and the special ed, which is always the next major item, is 25%. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
It serves a lot of purpose, but it's always a huge number. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. It was a good question. Everybody okay?
Yeah, let's carry on.
So now we get to unpack even more. And so now we're at Harold Martin, and you can see by grade, kindergarten, art, English, math, social studies, all at kindergarten. You can see the increases. And this is just 2 pages, but regular education, it was recommended 24, budgeted, and it's up. So this is again drilling down, how much do we spend on science at Harold Martin School? You can unpack even more.
Steve, can you scroll down to the bottom just to show the increase in how you directed your team to maintain?
So thank you, Norm. On this category, so this year the board was pretty specific proactively, trying to have us get to as close as we can on the building level, which is supplies and areas like that, to 0%. So Harold Martin actually in this area of our work is less than it was last year. Everybody okay? And we now have this level of detail, and this is really the work of Michelle implementing Norm's and Rob's wishes, trying to unpack and drill down layer by layer. Remember, we started with a massive spreadsheet, and now we're down to science education at Harold Martin. The next one is Maple. And this one, Maple is down in this category by minus 4.9%. And so we have custodial services, utilities, ground, and things like that. Library services. So it's one deeper level of the programmatic budget by building. Everybody okay? And we'll stay with the trend. And now this is the high school, which is really two schools, middle and high school. Again, you get to see what we spend in athletics here, in assemblies, instructional work, guidance services. And now the reason why this one is up is because we had some transfers from to contracted services, right, Michelle?
As well as VOC.
Oh, thank you. So this is the CRTC increase, and we're really seeing almost double the number of students who participate in the CRTC program, which we think is wonderful. So this increase is because of CRTC and some transfer to contracted services. If you took that out, you would have seen a very similar flat budget. I hope I'm not rushing. I'm not trying to rush. If I am, I apologize.
This is a good pace, Steve, and I'm keeping an eye on everybody to see if anybody has a hand raised.
Everybody okay?
It's just a comment, for those who want to see detail, this is a place to get detail, and it's a lot easier to peruse if you want to than the previous 50-page documents that we used to get. And it, so obviously separates the wages and the benefits and all that, and just down to just the expenses. But I thought it's a lot of work, but it certainly should quell some of the questioning of where stuff, quote unquote, is hidden.
No, thank you. And thank you to Michelle, Norm, and Rob, and the community. The community offered up a district model that we adapted for the Hopkinton version, but the Finance Committee's 9 meetings started, I think Norm was right, started with taking a look at the budget format, and we unpacked the fund balance, adequacy aid, revenues. It's really been a good committee. And the last section for this is the SAU office. And this has the increases in contracted service. We've already talked about the special education out of district tuition and things like that we've already hit.
I've lost track a little bit. Can you just quickly run down through where the 624,000 increase would be from?
The big ones, this is where the bond is.
Yep.
The bond increases here.
The majority of out-of-district special ed is not in a building, it's in the district.
Good.
So that's in the 1,200 area. Also, I believe you're gonna have same kind of thing what Steve talked about earlier. Speech went from a person to contracted services. So again, because we're just looking at non-staff items, it's gonna come up here as an increase, but that's just because there's a decrease on the staff side that you just can't see. And I think that'll make the majority of it.
It might be for the next meeting, just put a little blurb below there where the big hitters are for that increase. That's gonna, I think people are gonna really wonder what that's about.
Happy to.
You folks totally understand it, but anyone picking this up for the first time, I don't think would gather that knowledge.
No, I love that insight in between. I'll make sure I clean up the revenue sheet with the 42.5. We'll make sure we add a paragraph here highlighting the big ones. Appreciate your help, Don, very much.
Welcome.
Everybody okay? I
want to take it.
Piece, and Mark, if you want to bump up Rob.
Yeah, I want to say something real quick before Rob comes on. I just want to say, the last couple of documents that you have seen has been from the Finance Committee. I'm pleased to say that, over the last years, this community has asked for more of a better budget presentation, more of a line-by-line approach in which we can able to show the community where the increases are in our budget. I'm pleased to say it's been a great great experience and great opportunity to work with Steve and Rob and Michelle on producing a more open discussion for the community to be able to see where the increases are in our budget. I'm pleased to have Rob join us to go over this presentation that we delivered to the school board to deliver this budget to the budget committee. So with that, I appreciate Rob taking the time to join us and to really unpack everything that we've seen in those slides and just putting it in a budget snapshot for this group to understand and to really kind of see where it is on the tax rate impact. Rob, thank you for coming.
Hey Norm, how are you? You guys hear me, see me?
Hey, Rob, I just want to show, because you and I haven't had a chance to talk recently, the total budget number I slid over here, just so you know it's there.
Okay, all right.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you guys. So this was put together as a little bit of a history lesson and also just an opportunity to sum up in a very, very quick way where we were at. So at the very top, you see where we started from, Steve's original budget, which was $22,190,890, which represented approximately, sorry, Michelle, a 5% increase over the previous year. And, you know, you've already seen the drivers. So you have the New Hampshire retirement, the building bond, the out of district tuition, and the transportation. And then at that time, we felt like the state adequacy gap was going to be 393,000. So it's in red because I think it's really important for everybody to understand that these are matters that are just out of our control. These are costs that we're going to incur regardless of what we do. And then, you know, initially the PPE was forecast at about 100,000, and you know, over time down in yellow, we'll see that Steve and Michelle felt like there are other ways we could get that done. The green is really the increase in the operating budget. So I had asked Steve and Norm and I and the finance committee and brought to the board way back, you know, what was the overarching vision for this year? And it really was contractual and inflation only budget. And Steve, I looked at that number from that crazy spreadsheet that I gave you, and it's pretty darn close. You did a great job. So the third grade teacher at Carroll Martin School, at that time, we felt like it was going to be 2 IAs, or Steve felt like it was going to be 2 IAs and a numeracy assistant. So on the expense side, we were looking at an almost 5% increase, and on the revenue gap, a 1.8% increase. So that's the history of the starting point. And then the finance committee and Steve and Michelle, which really does all the work, went to action to bring things down. So expense reductions, reducing the maintenance trust by 50,000. We reduced PPE to 75,000, feeling like that could be offset with funds that might be coming forward and maybe hopefully a dwindling of this pandemic. There was an IA at, I don't know if it's at the middle school or at the high school, that we felt like we could save some money there, and then trim some money from the curriculum line to 13,968. And then on the revenue side, another 50,000 in fund balance. And as Steve has already talked about, you know, expectations of surplus that are reasonable moving forward as we go through the year. Taking another 50,000 out of Article 10. You know, and we probably could have taken more from fund balance, but then that puts us in jeopardy down the road to not be able to meet that number. So the safer call was, let's take a little bit more from Article 10 and less from projected fund balance. The change in athletic fees has been discussed, and that's been a topic of conversation for a while. Those fees haven't really changed since their inception, so now they've sort of been brought up to speed. And then there was also some additional revenue from special ed aid. And then you've got your warrant articles and their costs over in the whatever color that is, kind of a pumpkinish looking thing. And then that brings you down to the tax rate. So we end up at 2208 with a $1.65 increase. Of that, about 4% comes from the budget itself. But again, when you go back and look at that, the things that are necessary changes is about 1% of that. The rest is required. And then the bond increase accounts for about 2.59, and the warrant article is 1.51, which brings us in at about 8% increase. And then we did a little bit of an assessed value look as to what the impact on someone's actual tax bill would be. So this was, again, and it certainly could use some revision if you guys suggest it, but a way to take a quick look at where we were, what we did, and what the result is in terms of the dollars and cents.
Rob, thank you very much. I appreciate
Rob, thank you.
walking through that.
Does anyone have any questions on this spreadsheet?
I guess I was confused, Norm, because I had thought that you or Steve had indicated previously that the 3.8% increase included the bond.
So this is the tax rate we're talking about. So the budget increase is a different discussion. So the budget increase is 3.8%. When you wrap that with the shortage of revenue and all the other stuff we're doing, these are the numbers you get for the tax rate.
Yeah. So Ken, 4% of the tax rate increase is the budget. And then, so altogether, it's an 8% expected estimated tax rate increase, of which the budget is one piece. So the expense side was 3.8, you take into the revenue, and that's how it works.
I just got a quick question. Rob, could you just explain why the $212,000 number in yellow is up by the reds? I don't get why you put it up there.
I just put it there because initially we felt like that revenue gap was going to be 393,000, but after the mechanics were done, the revenue gap that would need to be raised by taxes is 212,000. When we started the process, it looked like we were going to have to raise through taxes 393, but after all of the work that was done through fund balance, Article 10, finding some other revenues, it's down to 212,523. So I just put it up there. It's more of a mental reminder to me than anything else.
Okay, that's just the only color that was out of position, and that just threw me a little bit. That's all.
Sorry about that. That was a last minute change.
Great job.
Rob, of the 1.5% increase for warrant articles, how does that break down among the Article 3, 7, and 8?
I have not done that mathematical business, but we could certainly do that for you for next week.
So the teacher's contract is 31 cents. The maintenance trust is what, 19 cents, Michelle? And then, so we can figure that out. And it's 13 cents. So it's, so I think the technology trust is like 3 cents. Michelle doesn't like my ishes, but if you give me an ish.
And I don't, you're obviously going to talk about the teacher's contract at some point, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I'm assuming healthcare is whatever is a driver there.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week. What we're on how it was developed, but yeah, healthcare will be addressed. There is we think a significant change in healthcare, but we'll talk about that next week with Jim.
Okay.
Hey, Rob, when you have, if you're able to, on the blue rows where you have the percent increases for the budget, bond, warrant,
yep,
in total, okay, on that row below it, could you just put the corollary dollar amount?
Sure.
Could you add that in?
Yep.
Thanks.
And where on this document would we find the net increase in new hires? Would that be in the yellow section?
So Steve will speak to this, but the only change in staffing represented in this budget is that third grade teacher. one IA, and the numeracy assistant. So there's been a change there. Initially, it was 2 IAs, but we reduced one down below. So one teacher at Harold Martin, 1 IA, and 1 numeracy assistant.
You nailed it.
We want-
Rob. Perfect.
We want to be able to show you from what was started and what we decided to go through for the finance committee to bring to the board.
That was perfect.
So are these all full-time positions or is there any part-times?
Those would all be full-time positions.
The numeracy assistant is shared, 0.6 of it at Harold and 0.4 of it at Maple in theory. So that's a shared position between 2 buildings. The instructional assistants at the high school, we think, and the 3rd grade teachers in full-time position.
Okay, thanks.
But the total amount of those 3, right, is like 1 3/4 PPE or something like that, right? Like the numeracy assistant and those aren't paid the same as a teacher, so it's.
Correct. The assistants are on the HES scale and the teachers on the teacher's contract scale.
Yep.
So it's not, yep.
Steve and Rob and Norm, this isn't actually a question specific to this this snapshot spreadsheet, but it just was prompted by it, if you don't mind. It's actually 2 different questions, but have we ever budgeted revenue from the I can't remember what it's called. It's like the Hopkinton School Foundation, and I thought of that because I'm looking at this athletic fee increase and thinking about, and these are not really connected, but it just made me think of it. You know, the impact of that on students where that additional cost, you know, could be prohibitive, and we wouldn't want a student to not participate in athletics because of that additional cost. And it's just like the kind of thing where I thought, oh, maybe that's something that, whether it's the Booster Club or the Hopkinton, you know, School Foundation, that they could help to offset that increase. So I just wondered if the district had ever come to agreement with the Schools Foundation on revenue to offset certain expenditures.
I don't know if you can do that, quite honestly. I'll just talk on the, we have to do what the students need. And so we have to budget for, you know, things, and the school foundation is for extra stuff. So it would be a hard one. I'd have to get the auditors involved in that kind of a thing, but I'm not so sure that could be done for positions that are needed for students.
So Michelle's right. The foundation mission is to support or supplement. So regarding, you're right though, Mark, we certainly don't want the fee to be the barrier for participation. So all our requests for changes in fees and support for field trips or for others goes to our nurses. And so the way it would work, if this was a hardship, they would contact our school nurse, because that's our most confidential system in place. And the nurses would go to the administrators and say, we need to waive the fee for this family because of these compelling reasons, or we need to waive 50% of the fee, or we need to use the principal support fund. So there's a number of ways that once we hear about it, we can support families. But some of the concerns are always that, you know, no one, it's tough to get people to come forward. That's the right for the support. But if they do go through our nurses, we have put in place structures to support families to ensure, as you just said, that the fee itself is not a barrier to participation.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate that information, and also on the foundation. And maybe, you know, if this increase is implemented, perhaps some, you know, there may be just some extra emphasis on outreach to families at the beginning of the school year and at the beginning of each sports season around that.
It is an incredibly supportive community. I think Michelle has told me of people calling up to pay lunch debts of people, just random. A lot of people, the practices, I think Rob did it, I did it. When you pay a field trip, you just pay for 2. You know, you just double it. So this community is extraordinarily supportive, and we appreciate that. We try to make it as confidential as possible.
And that is true. We, you know, quite a few people have called asking how they can donate. And a lot of, we do accept, remember my first year in the board, Steve, how many PTA? It was just a great overwhelming reception from the PTA and from the community, that they're always looking at ways to help out families who just can't afford something. And I just think we always have that opportunity to people in the community to give back to help out with this.
Everybody okay?
Just one other comment aside. I'd like each time that you show a fund balance that's been allocated, to show every opportunity to show what remains in that fund. Whether it's a footnote or whether, not necessarily on this page, I'm looking back at the revenue. You know, we got a fund balance donation of 150. Well, how much is still left in that one? Just so that people know what's there, that we haven't taken all of the money out or whatever, or what might be there as an additional.
So you're talking about the tax rate stabilization fund, Don?
Any fund that's established that we're taking money from, just show in parentheses or in a footnote, whatever's left.
So fund balance, you can't have anything left.
Okay,
So because we're not like the town, we have to give whatever's not in our Article 10 set aside, like what Steve was just talking about. It has to go back to reduce taxes. So
okay.
that's like zero.
Whenever you get your legend and definition of all these terms, that would be clearly stated there. I wouldn't ask that question. Good.
But here's an example, Don. Article 10, that 50 here, I can put what's left right there.
Yeah.
So
in any case you get an opportunity to do that, it's nice to know what's there.
Yep. We will do that. Fund balance, we can tell you what the total is here, but we can't tell you what's left. The total is 542. Article 10, what's left is 150. But yeah, we can do that, no problem.
And we had a little bit of that information, Don, on the slide, but anyway, we can communicate it better to show you the balance from the tax stabilization and from other accounts. We can gladly do that for you, not a problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mark, I had a question for Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rob, Steve Reddy here. Just given obviously the impacts on the budget compromise from last year, and obviously this year is designed to be a real maintenance budget without any new initiatives. As our resident teacher, how are you feeling about the curriculum? This is more of a global question, obviously.
Okay, I appreciate that. And, you know, Steve will give me a little latitude and discretion here. You know, I think with this budget, and I'm just speaking for myself as a board member, you know, our responsibility is to put forward a budget that supports our educational system. And it's the educational system that people have grown accustomed to. And to me, that means what are the class sizes in the elementary schools? What are the courses that we offer in the middle and high school? What are the class sizes there? What extracurricular programs do we offer? And this budget supports all of those things. So I'm confident, or I feel good about, this is the school system that we've all grown to know and love. If there is a major push, like there was last year, to have serious reductions, you know, as you can go through that programmatic budget, there's no small dollars to be cut that are going to save us. The things that would be next to have long, hard discussions about are class size, programs, athletics. And I'm not saying that, and again, I'm speaking as one board member, but that's where we're at. This is a decision to say, this is the school system that we believe is best for our kids, and this budget supports it. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
This Ken, one thought you might want to consider is, for valuation purposes, you're using just under 781 million. The select board decided that we could increase that by 1%, and you might consider doing the same, which would obviously have an impact on the tax rate increase.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And it's something Michelle and I've never done, but we can talk about it. But I appreciate that. That would certainly impact the tax rate.
Can you speak? I mean, it seems somewhat indefensible that the town and the school would use different valuations. Can you speak to the reasoning behind the select board doing that, creating not doing different from school, but increasing by 1%? And I'm just curious. I'm wondering why we wouldn't
We
always
were
have the same with the school and the town.
on the select board, I'd say recognizing the building, particularly residential in town. Since last April, we're estimating that when the new assessment comes out, I believe in this coming April, that it'll reflect a 1% increase. You know, whereas the schools are being more conservative and are keeping the prior total townwide valuation.
Yeah, Neil and I meet regularly. I didn't know that the town was using a different valuation. And to be honest with you, we've always used we've always used the one on the tax rate setting unless we've got DRA, right, Michelle? I mean, that's what we've always done.
Right. I mean, we like to be I'm not saying anyone's not, but like when I think of transparency, I know I can show that number somewhere else that exists and it's not like a made up number. You know, I know you have data to support a number of increase, but that's why we've always done it that way, is because if anything, it's going to be less than what we're saying. So it would just mean that the tax rates would be less.
But I appreciate the suggestion, and we can happily talk about it. Always learning in this job.
Yeah, and I'm just, pointing out and leave it to you.
Thank you.
Rob and Norm and Steve, are there additional slides or information that you're going to share in your presentation tonight?
There's just two
Yes.
more documents left, but they're quick.
Great.
Everybody okay? And you can still see the screen. So this is the history of the tax rate. Sorry, the fund balance. I'm sorry. Going back, this is the fund balance, and you can see this is where we were last year at 392, and we went up to 100. We went up to, what was it, Michelle? 542, something like that. So you can see it's where we've been in that vicinity, and this is right from the and you're going to see this. This is right from the audit, and so where that 300 last year's fund balance came from, the 392. We had personnel, we had benefits. We had a change, and if we don't implement all early retirements, we have to budget by CBA. We had more revenue in some areas. We were over in some areas. This is the 171 was for Chromebooks. We did some maintenance work out of the fund balance, including the cathodic protection at Harold Martin and the bleacher project. This was what I spoke about, the 40,000 that the board set aside for needs due to the pandemic. And then we also took care of a hot water heater. So this is how a fund balance comes in. We had less dues and fees and repair, and you can look at this, but that's how we unpack the fund balance. And remember, we start the budget in October and we don't expend it until finish the June of the following year. And so what this means is we don't have, we set an expectation and we meet that expectation. How are we doing? The last one, and this was just sometimes and we have a slide about where we are, and I just gave you all the lists of all the districts, and these are like districts, K through 12 districts. And Hopkinton is here at 24, but you can see Sunapee spends 27,000 per student. We spend about 17,800 per student. And if you go all the way, you can see what happens. And today, Representative Luno spoke about this. And then Manchester spends about 12,500 per student. So we are right in the middle at 24 out of 52. So all these districts spend more per student. than we do. But I typically, you guys like the whole list. So we threw it in ahead of time. And Mr. Zankel, that's our last supplemental material for tonight.
Thank you, Steve and Norm and Rob. Can I ask I do want to ask a question and then open up to the board for additional questions about the fund balance. It's probably I think you've probably answered this question before, Steve. So if you look at the past 8 years, we average about $400,000 a year, right? And again, I'm just going to use the term operating surplus because that's how I think about it, right? So given that track record, and I don't know what it looks like if you go back another 8 years, every year we are one way to look at it, put it this way, a critical eye on this might say, every year we are raising more money through taxes than it turns out we need, to the tune of several $100,000. And we return it the following year. So it's cash in it, it ends up getting used. But I just wonder, what is sort of like the budgeting philosophy behind that? And has there ever been discussion of saying, well, let's reset, given our many, many years of track record here, is there a reset at some point where you say, well, we're going to actually say, we're going to take our budget and we're going to knock back the revenue by 200,000 because of our long track record?
No, and that's exactly what we tried to do last year, because to get to 464 and 526 and 561, we froze the budget. We didn't implement the budget that the voters, and I end up approving every PO, and Michelle doesn't sleep at night, and I worry about it because we have to meet that obligation. But because the revenue from the state has been so inconsistent that we've used fund balance trying to help with the tax rate. And so last year, I thought it was a courageous decision by the board in January to reset it exactly what you said, 150, Mark. And that was we were going to implement the budget, we were going to help, and then it was okay. It was easier to do that. We had the 640 from the state, and so it was the year to do it. And then the first budget failed, and then we used the pandemic savings to get to 392. And then this year we couldn't hold at 392 because we had the 830, state adequacy. But I mean, in talking with and learning from Michelle in past, you can't run a school district with 1,000 kids and 200 employees to zero on the fund balance. That ends up, we can't run a Michelle, oh my gosh, if Michelle and I couldn't pay the bills, it would be a disaster. And in a district about an hour from here had to have a deficit appropriation and permission from DRA, and the commissioner had a special meeting. So in a $20 million budget, 400,000 is a 4% surplus. It's off the top of my head. I understand that but we are returning it at the tax rating. We're not using spending sprees, and we're budgeting our obligations that start in October. But we don't want, this is 2017. That's an awful year for Michelle and me. Trying to get to a fund balance of $560,000. That was a terrible year. Michelle and I'm meeting with everybody about every PO, trying to get that, but we do it. And we do that because at this meeting, we said the estimated tax bill increase, but you are 100% on. I wouldn't get to zero. We would have loved, Rob would have loved it, and Norm would have loved to stay at 400 this year. But we had to find more revenue because we had to compensate for the big hole from the state adequacy. And this year, because of the pandemic, we're going to save, as Steve talked about, we'll save some buses. Our sports programs were about half, and transportation there. But I'm with you, but there's got to be some surplus. But Michelle, I know that this is my last time, but I know Michelle will never want to get to 560 again. The 542, we're going to have to eat some of that next year because it's just too hard. And I apologize for that long answer.
No, thank you, Steve. That was really, really informative. Thanks. Steve, ready?
I apologize. I'm the newbie on the budget committee, but I'm not understanding the mechanics of how that fund balance actually gets transmitted to the taxpayers as a savings. That's one of two questions, maybe if you want to address that first.
Sure. So it's credited, the amount of the fund balance is credited at the tax rate setting, so we don't have to raise that $542,000.
So it's actually a reduction on a tax bill, or it's a reduction of where you're starting out on your budget for the next fiscal year?
Michelle, do you want to?
I'm gonna try, and sometimes I say it in a term that, and I don't mean it to be, but I'm trying to think of it in a term that could be easy. So think of it like it's extra in a checking account. So in essence, at the end of the year, we had $392,966 in our checking account that we couldn't hold anymore because that was excess that we had after paying all of our bills. And so before we did the tax calculation of what the per thousand is, we took that out of what we were going to raise from the voters. So I hope that helps.
That was great. I thought that was very good, Michelle. Thank you.
Okay, and my second question was on the last slide, the district comparison. Those look like calendar years. Am I reading that right to left or left to right?
So, so this is elementary, middle, high, and district.
Gotcha.
I don't know what happened to the top. I apologize, Steve.
Okay.
But so an elementary tends to be less expensive. You know, the co-curricular and things like that don't exist. So elementary, middle, high, and district.
Okay.
And this is only those districts that have K through 12. So for example, Derry is a K-8. We don't compare to Derry because they send all their people to Pinkerton. But I apologize for not having those on there, Steve.
Just another note, Steve, you might want to say, it does not include bonding or financing or transportation.
Happy to do that. Yep. You know what? I'll redo this with the top, and I'll add the state formula, what they exclude. Thank you, Mr. Houston.
Okay, other questions I'm trying to pull up I've got lots of windows open here. Thank you. Other questions for Steve or Norm or Rob from members of the committee?
Yeah, this is Rich. What is the estimated fund balance going to be for next year?
542.
Thank you.
542. Yep.
I did write
And then
that.
125 also. So it depends on how you look at it, because we're also taking 125,000 from fund balance as well.
And it's gonna have to pay off some food service stuff too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Rich.
Okay, anything else from the committee at this time?
We've got some homework, which I like homework in the education field. And we'll come back with some revisions and some new stuff. How's that sound?
That sounds great, Steve. And if it's okay with you, well, I guess this is really up to Norm. We are gonna have a public comment session now. So I don't know, Steve, if you're planning to stick around for that. Rob, I could also let me know, Norm or Rob, if you want me to keep you up here, Rob, as a panelist for this public comment session, or relieve you of duty.
I can stick around if Norm wants me to stick around.
Absolutely, Rob. If there's a question from his spreadsheet, the community can help. We're a team. We're delivering this budget together with the other three.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have a few members of the public that I see in the attendee list. If you are tuning in and you have a question or a comment that you want to share, please click on the participants button and raise your hand. And then I can unmute you. And I'll just take a minute here to see if anybody, oh, Tammy.
Name and address, please, when they do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, it's a quiet group out there, so
Oh, wow.
come on, Steve's last go around. We gotta ask some questions of him.
All right, we'll be back. We've got a couple more times.
All right, Steve, you may be able to go have your dinner now.
And we're gonna let Michelle go. Michelle's got a thing. Michelle, hey, thank you for tonight.
Thank you,
And
Michelle,
I'll talk
very much.
tomorrow.
And
Thank
we'll
you,
see.
Raphael.
And thank you, Steve. We will see you back.
You're all set?
Same bat time next week.
Mr. Goupel, you okay?
I am okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michelle, Steve, Rob, for your help. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you to the budget committee for the good questions. We only had 2 questions during our whole budgeting process when we had it with the school board, and we appreciate the questions that you guys are asking, and thank you for listening to us.
Thanks very much, Norm. Great presentation. Okay, Ken, you're up for the town financials update.
Sure. In terms of the financials update, where December 31 was the end of our fiscal year as well as the calendar year, I don't have the revenues and expenses yet. They take more time at year end. So I'm hoping that next week at our meeting, I'll be able to present those. I do have 2 things that I would like to update the budget committee on, though, if that's okay, Mark.
Please.
Okay, one is when I presented the town budget last year, I guess, there was discussion about the Houston barn and, what our thoughts were on what to do with it and all. And what the select board decided to do is to put together a blue ribbon panel to look into it, all aspects from tear down to complete renovation to just maintaining it for storage. And Don Houston is certainly a critical member of that committee. And if any other budget committee members would like to get onto that committee, I'd ask you to reach out to Don to let him know, because we want, as many people from the community that have some concerns and some expertise there to help out. The other item I wanted to.
Hey, Ken, may I just interrupt you for a moment on
Sure.
that item? Do
Yes.
you have just for anybody, either on the budget committee or who's listening in, who might be interested, do you have an anticipated time frame for that said blue ribbon panel?
For them to deliver a report?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I would certainly not be expecting it to be completed before our town meeting is concerned. We're looking that, if necessary, maybe putting a huge tarp or something like that over the roof of the building to preserve it for a year at a low cost, so that, next year we could, start implementing any recommendations that were made by the committee and funded.
Okay.
I don't know, Dawn, if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of comments. Liz Carr, not Liz Carr. Oh, got a brain cramp. Louise Carr is going to be the chair, and she's the spearhead of this thing. I am going to be just a member at best, and maybe just some advice and stuff, but she is the one running with this ball. She's coming to the select board, I think, your next meeting with a proposed sort of goals and objectives and some committee members that she has lined up. And the goal, I think, as I saw it, is that we would do the work this year and present it to the select board in time so that they could have plenty of time to massage it, look at it, and make the decision what they would present at not this coming town meeting, but the following one. So it's a year away before there would be any kind of actual proposal.
Okay. Thank you, Don. And you obviously know more than I do at this point. But if anybody is interested in contributing to the committee in one fashion or another, either reach out to Louise Carr, to myself, or to Neil, I guess. And listen into the next select board meeting, which is next Tuesday night at 5:30, and you'll be able to learn some more. So,
Ken, would we, my question would be is, would we have to be careful of the amount of participants from an elected board to be on such a committee? Would it be considered like a quorum? Let's say we had like 6 of the budget committee members on there. Would there be such a problem with that?
I guess I was certainly not anticipating that we'd have a quorum of budget committee members on this committee. So I'd say, if that happens, we'd have to address it. I think we probably then have to make things public meetings.
That was just something I'm thinking about.
I believe committee meetings are public anyway.
If that many members of the budget committee sign up, I'm going to start assigning more homework to the budget committee.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We're leaving.
No, I'm glad to hear that, Ken. I think that's great. That's great that group of people is going to be chartered. And I think that will be really helpful for the town as the town evaluates options. So thank you. And thank you, Don and Louise, if you're listening. Thank you.
Yes, I think Don had indicated that a number of years ago, quite a number of years ago, a study had been done, and we've just kicked the can down the road year after year, and think it's time that it's addressed.
It does strike me, Ken, that part of evaluating options is understanding the cost of those, and so if this commission has zero budget, I'm just curious how they're going to do that. That's something the select board can take up. Like they might need an engineer or somebody to advise them.
Well, there's the hope that we'll be able to get volunteers that have expertise in those areas. We'll also have Dan Blanchett from our DPW
Right, okay. That's good.
Involved. And Don certainly has a lot of expertise too, I believe.
Okay.
What Louise has already found is she's been pursuing the state and state grant type people. And there are a couple of organizations that do just this kind of thing. They evaluate buildings that have that kind of value. And she's already been in contact with them. So, at some point, maybe they'll come to the town and say, hey, we got to have a $500 matching fund or something like that. But it's strictly, starting out as a strictly volunteer, no budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Thank
Ken,
you.
could I just add, Ken, that during your presentation, and we've got the information here in our blue book, that on the back page of the Town Facilities Maintenance Trust, that $80,000 figure that's in our book might be a little bit high. Dan thought that was a rather high cost to do the roof over, and most likely it's going to be much less than that.
Yes, and at this point in time, as far as the amount in the budget is concerned, that's unchanged. And whether or not a decision is made, well, instead of the 40,000 that was anticipated or to go in, or the 60,000 this year, maybe that should be reduced. But at this point, that's unchanged. And we figure that assuming whatever the committee decides in the next year, it's going to cost the town dollars. So it makes sense to put some money aside now. Okay, if there's nothing else on this, I'll move on to my other item. Is that okay, Mark?
Yes.
Thank you. And this is actually back a number of months ago when the select board had a joint meeting with the school board. Norm and I were tasked with trying to develop a schedule for the different town and school meetings. We had convened a subgroup with Neil, Sarah, James Newsom, and Steve Chamberlain to look at it and try to assess what the legality, what the requirements were and all. And what we've recommended, and at this point, I believe both the school board and the select board have agreed to, is that as usual, on Tuesday, March 9th, there would be the election of town and school offices, as well as any zoning ordinances, that the vote would take place at the middle high school from 7 to 7. And it would be the same setup as it was in November, where people could either go inside and vote in person, they could vote outside, or they could vote by absentee ballot. Then on Saturday, March 20th, following all of the required Zoom meetings, there would be a drive-through vote on the school warrant. And the location of that is, I think that's to be determined, but that would be a drive-through. And similarly, on Saturday, May 1st, the town would hold a drive-through vote on the business session, again, following all of the different required Zoom meetings. And both the March 20 and the May 1 dates are somewhat tentative right now, because it sounds like the state is still looking at different types of legislation. But that's where we stand now, and with that schedule, it does not impact any of the budget committee schedules, as we've already addressed them. Norm, did you want to add to that summary?
Yeah, just I'm feeling positive about our budget, but if something happens that May 20th, something doesn't happen with our operating budget, the next one potentially, I believe we agreed, would be April 10th, because we have to understand we have to have teachers' contracts out by April 15th. So we had to make sure we had enough time that we could send out direct mails to every person and hold sessions and meetings in time. So the plan right now is on March 20th. If something happens, we're feeling positive. That's the most important thing. April 10th would be the next date, from my understanding, because we have to look at the teachers' contracts, which is April 15th.
And one of the things I disagree with, not that I have any choice, the state is requiring that we make a mailing out, not to every household, but to every registered voter. So both my wife and myself will each get an independent mailing. So it just increases the cost on us, but that's a requirement right now from the state. Okay, I guess with that sort of summary, I'll just ask if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Tammy, did you get all those dates, and do you feel like you got clarity on that? Thank you. Any questions for Ken or Norm on that schedule update? Wonderful. Ken, you're all set?
I am set. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. Don, is there an update that you want to share on the Kentucky Village?
I didn't realize. Yes, I didn't realize we were leaving Ken's presentation. Can I ask him a question? Can I go back?
Oh yes, of course.
Ken, did you get any traction from the select board on the capital improvement committee's suggestion to push out what you had here of the $50,000 for the irrigation on Park Avenue, and also postpone putting in the $10,000 for the clean out of the sewer lagoon?
I did not get any resolution. I will we have another meeting Tuesday, which is before our next budget committee meeting. And I certainly hope that I have resolution of those done. And
Again,
thank the committee.
I had on my CIP hat when I was talking about that with you folks. So it's the budget committee's hat thinking like to reduce the towns down below 5%.
We're already below 5%, but I would like to reduce it further.
Okay. Good, that's all I
So
had.
Ken, on that point, I guess, do you anticipate the possibility of a revised budget before the budget committee votes on the town budget?
Well, it depends on what the select board does. As Dawn mentioned, there are a couple of recommendations from the CIP committee. And if the budget committee adopts those, I'd be, bringing that up at the next budget committee meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that I wouldn't have a full new change, but I could show what the bottom line impact is, certainly.
Okay.
And once we do the, go out for the bonds and the refinancing, also want to show what that impact is. But that might not be for a month yet.
Okay. Thanks. Don, did you have anything further for Ken?
No, that's good, thank you. I'll do the precinct budget comments.
Thanks.
I only have the November one. They'll be passing out the December one at the meeting tonight, which obviously I'm here at this meeting instead. But as of November, we still have about $166,000 to come in as from the tax part of our budget. And we did complete getting the pipe buried up on Main Street, up by Linda Kimball, that field. It was a long-term problem we had to handle based on the court action. The pipe is laid. As you drive by there and look down that field, you'll still see a few mounds of loam, which will have to get spread out and seed put on it to make the field complete. That'll happen this spring, but those are the only two major items I have at this point. Any questions? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Don. Thomas, what's a good word from the Hopkinton Village Precinct?
No major updates. We don't have any changes from the last thing that I presented last week, so I think we're good to go for February.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Thomas? Okay, I'm gonna reopen the public comment section and we'll ask members of the public if you have a comment or a question to raise your hand using the participants button. And if you do that, I will unmute you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand yet. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment session and open it up to the board. Is there any other business that anybody wants to bring up before the board this evening?
I just had a question. Janet?
I don't see Janet anymore.
Yeah, that's what I was asking about. Janet gone?
Yes, she's no longer showing up on the participant list. Anything else for the board, Steve? Go ahead.
So again, my inexperience. So the school board has just presented a budget to us, the budget committee. What exactly are the mechanics from here moving forward to us approving? How much discussion do we get among the board? Obviously, we have public meetings. And I only got my binder today, so there's a lot of homework to be done. But I guess those are my questions.
Great, thank you. And now I really wish Janet was here, but Rich is also, we have a number of budget committee veterans, including Don, Ken, and Rich. So please chime in. So we have 2 more weeks. We have the following 2 weeks, January 20th and 27th, on the books as budget committee meetings. And so let me just start with the school budget. And so we're going to receive more information next week from the school. I think I don't have it all written down, but 2 things in particular. One is the budget bulletin, which is going to have a little further explanation, Norm, of some of the drivers of the budget. And then we're going to receive a presentation on the teacher's contract, right, which is a key. That'll be a separate warrant article. And we can also ask any follow-up questions and have conversation in the budget committee about any facet of the school budget next week as well. And then we have so let me just actually pause on that. Norm, did I get that right in terms of what you're planning to share next week?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. And then we have the following Wednesday, the 27th, as additional time for, I would say, for if there are questions that we put, additional questions or information requests that go to the school next week, that they'll be able to bring that information back on the 27th. Either next week or the 27th is an opportunity if there are any adjustments to the town budget, as we just talked about with Ken. And then I think on the 27th, we will see if we're ready for the budget committee to vote on the 4 budgets that have been presented to us. What we have to do is before February 10th, which is the public hearing, the budget committee will have to have a vote on whether we are recommending or are in favor of the budgets as proposed. And if we're not, then I think the sooner we inform the respective district or town or the better, so that they can determine if they want to make any adjustments before that public hearing. But we will vote as a budget committee, I would anticipate, on January 27th. Unless we need additional time, we could do it. We could schedule an additional meeting for February 3rd if we needed to. So we've got at least 2 more weeks on the book, Steve, for receiving information and discussion and deliberation. And I think we should tentatively think about taking budget committee votes on where we're at on the 27th. But we can push that off a week if we need to. So having said that, I would invite all of the veterans of the budget committee to tell me if there's anything that you think I've missed there or misstated.
I think you did a perfect job.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Let me clarify, our vote is before we actually have a public hearing.
Right. So yeah, thanks, Steve. Sorry. Then there's the next piece. Right. So the first step is for us to determine if we are in favor of the proposed budgets in advance of the public hearing. And then those proposed budgets will be shared at the public hearing. If the budget committee has a difference of opinion with the entity that is proposing the budget, let's just say that we are not in favor of the school budget that the budget committee votes, which happened 2 years ago, I think. The budget committee voted to reduce the budget put forth by the school board. Then we will share that information at the public hearing. We use the public hearing as an opportunity to hear from the public, hear their reactions to what has been put forth, either in unison of the budget committee and the associated, entity, or the differences of opinion we have. And then the budget committee will, at that point, have deliberations immediately after that public hearing, and we will vote on what is the actual budget number we're going to put forth to the town for each of these 4 budgets. So we essentially have 2 votes. We have a pre-public hearing vote and then we have the public hearing, and then we have a final vote, which is the one that really matters because that's the one that results in the numbers that go before the community.
And to be helpful to Steve, the February 10th is in the normal year would be when we would hold the meeting at the middle high school in the auditorium, which I know you've attended in the past.
Right, and actually it's something we'll need to find out because we have a series of documents that we have to sign, which we typically sign. I can't remember what those documents, what those state, there's specific state forms for each of these budgets that we have to sign, and we will have to come up with a mechanism, and maybe that's something that I can work on with Neil to understand what the mechanism will be for that.
Mark, I don't know if it would be the same, but for the select board, when we vote to say on the consent agenda for different items and we approve them, we do that obviously over Zoom, and just one select board member has to come in and sign them in person. And
Okay.
whether the same would work for the budget committee, I don't know.
Okay, that's a question that I will follow up on with Neil and try to get, I will find that out, obviously, in advance of the public hearing.
Mhm.
Steve, did that answer your question? I want to make, it's really important to understand this. And so I want to make sure that if there's more, please feel free to follow up.
No, I mean, I guess I understand the process. I think I'm just not clear on what exactly when the budget committee gets down to, like, I mean, do we really have any doubt what an 8% proposed increase is, how that's going to be received by the community? You know, what I guess I'm not really even sure what I'm asking, but just, I mean, when do we actually get to talk about it just as budget committee members?
Now, I mean, no, seriously. I mean, well, I think this week, next week, and the following week are, and then after the public hearing, those are really our opportunities. Is during these. It's a very valid question, but it is. I think starting now, and then particularly in the next 2 weeks, are opportunities to have conversations as budget committee, and I think it is important because if there are members of the committee who feel like the proposed budgets are out of step with what you'd be comfortable supporting, it's going to be important to bring that to light over the next 2 weeks so that whether it's the school or the town or whomever, understands that, and we'll take the temperature of the budget committee and see if there's enough people who have concern that we'd be asking for changes. I don't know. We haven't had that conversation yet. But so I would say the next 2 weeks are going to be really important in terms of the conversation that you're talking about.
If I can say one thing, Mr. Zanko, Steve, you make a comment about a temperature check, with the community and the feedback on what schools propose, and we've been operating in public. We've had 5 meetings in public, finance committee meetings, posted Zoom meetings, where anyone in the community had an opportunity to ask questions. And this is the way we have to deliver this budget on Zoom. And, like I said earlier in this meeting, we only had 2 questions. That's it. And we've had 166 people at some of these meetings, 2 questions. So, I mean, I'm saying that we've done our best in communicating this budget. It's going to be an interesting, once we get a number, how we communicate this number to the community like we did last year. But it's just, we've done everything we can so far to get where we are.
And believe me, I understand that, and I appreciate the work of the school board, and I especially you and Rob. Just, there's nobody on this committee that hopefully doesn't understand the political realities of what's going to happen in this town, because after tonight or the next presentation, that's when it really starts, Norm, and that as far as a discussion in the community.
And I agree with you. you know, a lot of it had to do, you know, when me and Rob, you know, met with the board, being able to communicate, you know, the shortage of state aid and how things happen when it comes to building a budget. You know, that was something that was important to the board is how can we start at the beginning of this budget process that we can deliver this to the community so they can understand it, because it's a big number when you look at the increase and you look over time, you know, how we can deliver it. So it's, you know, we can provide that communication.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the questions that you're getting, that you received tonight and that you will, in the, you know, probably next week as well, are, you know, the better we understand the budget, you know, the more we can, whatever the budget committee ultimately votes for to support, whatever that number is. My hope is that the committee will understand it and be able to explain it and be able to be ambassadors for that budget as well. We haven't always had unanimous votes at the budget committee on these budgets. So, but that's what we always, you know, we're always aiming for consensus as best as we can. And yeah, I think it's going to be there's going to be a burden on the school board, and Norm has spoken to this quite a bit, to try to get the word out. And you know, you're doing everything you can, and you can't force people to show up for meetings. But I think it's going to be important. It's part of our job is to help unpack it as best as possible and to give advice like was given by many of you tonight on how the school board can best present this information. So the more it's understood, the more likely people are to support it. But we've got some work cut out for you. Don.
I'm really shocked that we haven't had anybody call in with a question on the first round of the budget. I mean, the dynamics that went through last year were unbelievable compared to so far this year. Not to say it's not going to come with a lot of questions later, but I think the school has really tried, this current board has really tried to simplify and make this as open as possible. They've had a lot of people listening in to their conversations, and Norm hasn't mentioned it, but I think, you know, there's been a lot more interest on one specific topic, basically athletics, than there has been on anything relative to the school budget, which is, you know, I don't know, I don't even know how to read that. But just summarizing what I've heard so far, it's, you know, it's another $1.2 million increase in the school budget, which is, you know, like we've been seeing in the past, but there's a lot of reasons why that is where it is. The fixed costs that, in essence, because of the bonding and whatever that we've gotten the kickbacks from the state, it's hard for them to just cover that again. They certainly got a hard hit last year, and they've got we didn't ask the question specifically what that decrease resulted in the effect of the education for this current year, but that's sitting out there. But if you add in the school, the state, and the town, we're looking at a $1.95 increase on the tax rate, or a 7.3% increase on the taxes, which, you know, for a $100,000 house, it's a couple $100,000, and for a $300,000 house, it's $600,000, which is not small change.
$600, not $600,000.
$600, excuse me. Yes, we'd all be in trouble. But you know, I think it's a lot clearer this year than we've ever had in the past as to where the numbers are. And I think that's a bit of a comfort. And, you know, it's easy to see where the numbers are coming from, which I just feel very good from the school and from Norm and Rob trying to do something different with the financial side. There's still more room, I think, to get further down the road on programmatic budget, but that's, you know, we can do that for the next year or whatever. That's going to be a long-term type. I think they've made some nice advances, and it's going to be interesting what the comments are coming to us before our public meeting. Thanks.
And may I say something real quick? We also have to understand that we're implementing a budget that Steve's not going to be here for. You know, we are hiring a new superintendent, and, you know, the board is going through a hiring process, and, you know, I think you can see the progress between this board and the previous board in trying to change the budget format line by line and really communicate where the money's going. But it's really important to see that, the changes are coming and that, this board is going to be open to potentially new things down the road, which, we all have to work towards. So I think, there's small steps, we've had discussions that things don't happen overnight, but I think the progress from last year to this year and how we were able to share more information that, kind of would answer some questions that you normally didn't see before, I think was a big help for everybody.
Thanks, Norm, and Don, thank you for those comments as well. Other questions or issues or comments at this time for the board?
I'd just like to thank Don for bringing the folders the last couple of weeks to my house, and I think he probably brought them to some other people's houses too. Just thank you for doing that, Don. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Don.
Anything else this evening? All right, then. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, Tammy, you got enough of that? No. Who moved that? I'm going to
It was
say,
either Rich or myself.
okay, Rich moved it. Ken seconded it. All in favor, raise your hands. Opposed? Okay, everybody, we are adjourned. I hope you have a good week. I hope it's a very safe and calm week here in our state and around the country. And I just want to acknowledge, actually, as we adjourn, that next Wednesday, I hope and pray that it's a peaceful day. It's Inauguration Day, and there are some disturbing things that are in the news right now. And so it could be some people may be distracted next Wednesday, including some of us. And I want to acknowledge that now. It may impact who shows up, members of the budget committee and members of the public. So hopefully it will be a smooth day, but I will be here next Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you all, and I hope it will be a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Night all.